Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here this evening.
Free.
I'm just going to say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh, yeah.
Ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your wall.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement.
Hi there, this is Mike here. Since recording our last episode, my grandmother, Audrey Tinoco, passed away. She was featured on the episodes Come On Ray from this season, as well as an interview I did with her in the first season entitled Holy Shoes, Mom Made Clothes, and Spooky Radio Shows in the Great Depression. She was a beloved grandmother and mother. And of course, she was many more things than that as well. So she will certainly be missed by myself and also my fellow speech guys who got to spend a little bit of time with her through this podcast, as well as you listeners as well. So she was 96. She lived a very full life, full of love in many different ways. So I guess my prayer for you this Christmas is to keep her in your prayers, and also those close to you whom you love. So thank you very much. This is the end. This is the last episode of the second season. We look forward to connecting with you again. It's going to be sometime in mid-February that we'll be getting going with the next speech series, season 3. So with that, enjoy the show.
When you see the road from every direction, it will give you eyes, give you hope, it'll give you perspective. I've been back and forth, and yeah, I had my crashes. Now I've seen the road, it goes every direction.
Here we go, episode number 34, last one of season 2.
Here's to 2022.
It's a good year.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Landon, what's going on tonight?
Boom. Today we have Rene Girard. Talk he gave in 2009, an interview more, really, at the Hoover Institute.
But a speech, actually.
Yeah, right. Check him out. He's a Stanford professor of theology, philosophy, and has some interesting work that's starting to get a little more popular in certain online niches in the philosophical world. The reason we're looking at him is because he has some seemingly simple theories that have, I think, some profound implications for how to think about modernity, Christianity, and the events of Jesus and the biblical perspective for what happens next. How does the world operate with the Christian myth now fully transpiring? So
one might say prophetic.
Prophetic, yeah, it's prophetic, which finishes up our
last speeches by prophets
prophetic series. A couple things we'll be talking about: mimetic, mimesis, and scapegoating, and just really looking kind of historically comparing Christianity to other perhaps other religions, or just the nature of humans and how we interact with each other. What does it mean? How significant is it? So to dive in, we'll just start out with some definitions and an excerpt from the speech. And
so where does this speech/interview come from, Landon?
Yeah, the Hoover Institute, it's kind of later in Rene's life. He is an influencer of some of like the technologists of our era, Peter Thiel being one of them, who the ways that they think about the world and the Christian faith and what it means for society. So points of background you're particularly interested in, Mike?
Well, speech interview comes from December 2009. This Hoover Institute, like you said, it's between Rene Girard and this Peter Johnson guy, right, who works for this institute. About 36 minutes long. And I mean, I think a good summary of it, like you point out there, it's more of a summary of his life's work, right? It's compacting 36 minutes of 50 or 60 years of work between these three sort of ideas, or sort of four, depending on how you look at it. Mimetic desire, scapegoating as a binding substance of civilization, how Christianity subverts the scapegoating mechanism into something more profound, and then how that devolves into apocalyptic behaviors of civilizations. Those are sort of the four components of this speech that we're going to try to wade through as adult infants in the River Jordan seeking baptism, if you will.
Yep.
That was great, actually. Yeah.
So good. So good. All right. Quote idea number one. Let's listen to it, talk about it.
Imitative nature of desire leads to conflict.
It leads to conflict, and this is both something very obvious and which is a paradox for most people when they first realize it. If you imitate the desire of someone else, you admire that someone else, or that someone else may be your best friend. But as soon as you both desire the same object, and the objects really desirable exist only in one copy.
In ones.
So I shouldn't say copy, because it's not a copy. It's the original.
There is only one
There is
Helen,
only one
Helen of Troy.
Original. And therefore they have to fight. Therefore the theatrical situation par excellence is a situation of two people desiring the same object because they designate that object to each other. Once the imitated subject realizes he is imitated, this reinforces his desire. He said, I certainly selected the right object. As soon as this man saw her, he fell in love with her, like I did. Therefore, we are right. Therefore, I'm more convinced than ever that I should desire her. Therefore, he's my enemy.
Right.
Just another way to think about that, I think what he's really beginning to talk about here is his main theory, which is mimesis. Another way to say that is man is the creature who does not know what to desire, and he turns to others in order to make up his mind. We desire what others desire because we imitate their desires. So his theory posits, just a definition, this desire leads to natural rivalries and then eventually scapegoating. And societies unify their imitative desires around the destruction of kind of collectively agreed upon scapegoats. So that's big picture. We're talking about mimetic theory, mimesis, just the idea that, even reading that out loud, kind of what I thought of was just like original when I think of the word desire, like original desires, Garden of Eden, like desiring the thing that you cannot have, or that Eve, took the apple. Satan kind of tempted her with that initial desire, and now everything we do is kind of what we see others have and end up wanting that, and that is like the basis for conflict. What do you guys think when you heard of this concept? Was it like too simple and like that makes sense, it's perhaps not even that interesting, or was it somewhat more profound? Where were you at on the spectrum there?
For me, it was almost like popping a bubble. It made zero sense until and then just the bubble is popped and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then you can kind of see it everywhere. Actually, Bishop Barron has a little 9-minute spiel on Rene Girard that was kind of a bubble popping kind of incident for me. But yeah, it appears very technical, with all the, mimetic desire. That's kind of an unusual language, oh, this designates desire to something else, yeah, that sounds super confusing. But I think that, yeah, it was just but once you see it, it's you don't, I see this with just young nieces and nephews. They don't even know there's another toy in the room until their sibling has it, and now they want it. I think that's kind of the simple version, but you see it
evident right off the bat. Yeah.
Yeah. With that, I thought that example was the one that clicked, and then it's oh yeah, you see this in advertising, you see this. I see this in myself when it's aspects of my marriage, even that it's oh yeah, we're fine. We look this is going great. And then someone says something, it's wait, well, that doesn't sound like and now it's well, shoot, am I missing out? Am I doing the, and yeah, it can certainly spark a lot of, internal angst, and then subsequent, just action, violence, as he would say, as he would put it, in certain ways. But yeah, it's a very, it's the type of thing that's so simple. It's like this is water, It's so obvious that you don't know you're swimming in it. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think when I first heard it, kind of similarly, I guess his language was kind of, maybe like Matt, you said technical, but I felt like I had a little bit of trouble just following him the first time I listened to it. But then I thought I don't know, I appreciate it. I think the interviewer did a good job too. And then I also listened to the Bishop Barron 9-minute video about it, which was good. But anyway, I think the kid example was, I think, what struck it to me so much, with how kids seem to do that with everything. Whether toys, but food, clothes, literally everything. My kids, the little one wants what his brother has all the time. So I think that kind of made it just kind of sit and say, oh yeah, that does seem to be true. We didn't teach him that, obviously. My other first reaction was I just kind of wondered if that was going to apply across all desires, or if it was almost more limited to certain things. So I tried to start thinking about, maybe, I don't know, we didn't want this house because a friend had this exact same house, but because of certain things, maybe a house a lot like this has seemed attractive, or this is what I'm kind of quote unquote supposed to have. And it does seem like when you actually think about different desires, it does seem to ring true, I guess, when you actually start thinking about why you want different things.
There's an example in the supplemental analysis video that Jonathan B. and David Perel do. You could think, oh, well, if mimetic desire is copying or because they have that I want it, doing the opposite of that desire is still positioning yourself kind of off of a sort of mimetic thing, where it's the example they gave was, the business world always wore suits. Everything you wore suits, you like dressed the part, you fit the role, the mold, and then kind of the tech bros came along, and now it's like t-shirts. It's like they are, you could say they're not like mirroring what is going on there, but they're still responding to it and saying like, I'm the opposite of this, and trying to like be on, you know, a similar frame of mind, but
Like a photo negative, you can still
just rebelling against, you know, their version of it. And then that's still sort of a mimetic dance.
So here's what I think that the speech, just to keep our branding, the speech does not do a great job of, and it required me looking into this. What's his Jonathan Peele?
Jonathan B.
Both?
David Perel, yeah.
Okay, David Perel. This other lecture, not a speech, did a better job of explaining. So, and what I mean by that is like setting up a more profound context for this idea of mimetic desire, right? So prior to Rene Girard's idea of mimetic desire, which originated in like the 70s or 60s when he theorized this, as I understand it, anthropologists had this notion of it's not exactly clear to me, just basically hedonistic impulses sort of governing the most substantial human behavior, right? It's like you want food, you get food. And which is sort of animalistic sounding, like that's what animals do, right? They move because they need to go get food or water over here, or they need to mate over here. And what Girard does is says that no, what makes humans unique is this idea of desire. Now you might say that, well, what are you talking about? I mean, I see two dogs fighting over a piece of meat. Like, how is that not mimetic desire? Well, I'd say what's different is that both of the dogs, like, they just simply want that meat. They don't want it because another dog wants it. I mean, I think if you think hard enough, that idea can sort of distill out where it's wanting something simply because the other person wants it without taking into account the object itself. It's not expressed like super clearly in that segment you just read, so I'm gonna like say it again.
Yeah.
That idea, the example of like the girl is a really good example that I can think like personally in my own life, where you're dating someone, maybe not necessarily as excited about the relationship as you'd like to be, but then you hear that so-and-so thinks that this girl is attractive or great, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm on the right track, right? It's like nothing about your history or memory of this girl has changed, but simply the fact that another guy, you know, wants her in some way, right? So that, yes, definitely seems relevant there.
So this talks about the concept being like negative, and the main way that conflict arises between people and even nations, that, you know, marrying and coveting either resources or consumerism. I don't know.
Which makes sense, because war does not exist among lions, right? Obviously they fight. Obviously every groups of animals fight, but war is a distinctly human behavior. And yeah, it seems like it has 100% to do with desire, mimetic desire, right?
Probably, I guess the original story would probably be Cain and Abel. The conflict there being like, who gave the better offering to God,
right.
Like, and Cain being like, yeah, just didn't feel like his was up to it, so he killed his brother. And like, it's not quite the original sin, but it's like the second.
Well, I think even the story, and you know, there's different videos on Girard on original sin, and maybe he says this effectively exact thing, but I mean, you think even even though the story of original sin, as it's presented with Adam, Eve, Apple, even if it's not obviously mimetic desire, what you said earlier, Landon, I think does sufficiently reflect it that it's more or less the same thing, is that wanting what you can't have, right? I mean, if someone else has it, then you can't have it. And with the apple, Eve could not have it. And so it was, she wanted it because she could not have it. Not, well, I don't know. I'm starting to ramble on there, but maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah.
But Cain and Abel,
couple more things on this I'd be curious to get your opinion on. The another really interesting point was like it stirs up conflict, and through all of our podcasting and just like the research we've done is like, man, people, men, societies, like you used to just have to go to war a lot. I mean, if we were born in any other generation, like we would have been called to fight or like been put on the line. Like yeah.
Can we do a thought experiment really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, right. So our parents, effectively Vietnam, right? That would have been the war, or the Gulf War, maybe you're a little bit younger. Grandparents, World War II or Korea. Great grandparents, World War I. Great grandparents.
They might have got off.
They might have got off. Yeah, may have gotten off, or the Spanish American War. Is that right? Great grandparents, Civil War.
And then
great
anything before that. I mean, all of Europe.
It was just constant.
Yeah,
war.
It was just like it slowed down until what? When did it start slowing down? You guys know where I'm going with this. I think it slowed down like with the Industrial Revolution and the onset of capitalism.
I guess which Industrial Revolution? Because I know that. I mean, I've heard people kind of categorize it in like phases.
Yeah.
But are you talking
1800s?
Like
1800s. Yeah, just like the move. Okay. So one of the theories they posit is like there is this mimetic desire, like the conflict like is growing. It always is like kind of expanding, and it seems like we live in a super peaceable time, and there's not that many wars. There's kind of perhaps atomic bombs or whatnot, but Girard is like, it's all pent up and somewhat being suppressed because the outlet for it is like just pure regulated competition and like the markets and businesses. And when you look at and listen to like how businesses talk and how cutthroat they are, and it's profit motivated, like all of that energy can be flowed into perhaps a more useful or less violent purpose. But if it's not highly regulated and organized, like in the older parts of our conflict leaches out, like it will end up with wars and rumors of wars. So
yeah, I mean, I think the like phrase that was used by Girard or Jonathan and what David is that there's a difference between true peace and the potential for violence. And Girard would say that we're in a high potential for violence.
Which you wouldn't know, like if we were having this podcast a year ago before Ukraine, Russia, even like the latest developments of China, like things did feel very peaceable. You wouldn't have been worried about potential for violence. But now it seems like, it is there. And it is something that takes a lot of diplomatic work to maintain.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting concept, just like capitalism replacing war. Yeah.
Being well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess replacing is the right word, but it's almost like
an outlet,
like
for the worst.
Like, a kid
harnessing the energies of
dealing drugs. It's like, all right, he joins the wrestling team and beats the crap out of people there. Got it. Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a really profound idea when you really think about it, right? Like you're saying, Matt, like, yeah, the guy who in one point in history would be the most dangerous guy in the Wild West is now
Right.
Elon Musk
Yeah.
or, something like that, right? And like that's a really impressive idea about capitalism. Like, whoa, holy smokes, that's an incredible achievement.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
understated, right? Now there's a dark side of that that they reference, which I forgot. So it's obviously not that important.
Well, there's certainly like all kinds of shady capitalism.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think it always feels like when we try to describe it, like we're comparing capitalism to socialism. It's like, no, it allows for growth or hope or potential, but this seemed to like put the finest point I've ever heard on it. Like it channels negative energy,
I think,
to more productive things.
But it doesn't, and it doesn't just channel that negative energy into positive energy. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it, because Girard seems rather like skeptical of it in different areas as well. And like definitely sees like the dark side of it. So it's almost like, and he talks about it kind of like it's this sort of silent ramping up instead of this like, you might even think of it like the family that doesn't talk about their conflicts until they don't talk to each other anymore, versus like for some reason I always imagine an Italian family. Sorry for our Italian listener. Actually, not sorry, because this is a compliment actually. But I feel like the families that just kind of let it fly sometimes actually like stay together better.
Yeah.
Because they air their conflicts. They kind of achieve a resolution because they speak their mind. It's not this kind of silent, seeping thing. So, I mean, I guess capitalism's almost like the silent seeping kind of ramping up, almost like a highway to, just like a highway to like mega violence, right? Which is kind of getting into maybe the apocalyptic stuff, which maybe we'll save that for a little bit later. But, so like he's definitely very skeptical of that too, which is kind of, he's just a unique combination of, I don't even know if optimist and pessimist are like the right words, but like, he has a good, like positive view of the human person and like humanity and like this, especially in the light of like Christ. But he's also like just very sharp and very like quick to like acknowledge the darkness, just a unique perspective, I guess.
So I would be curious to sit on this and like do the reverse. Like, all right, mimicking someone might be like a foundational sin, error, theory. But like now that you've learned that in your own life, or like how have you thought about balancing that with like being true to yourself? Like when there is clearly like this status quo, mimic the prestige, what everyone else is doing, either by like doing the exact same thing or like doing the perfect opposite, when the right answer is some form of like be true to yourself or, follow your own calling. Have you ever noticed, or it's like when you get off the main tracks of life, of what society or culture or your family or whatnot expect, that is a hard, that you're like running up against this mimetic force? And like what is the positive way to like act given that a potential negative was mimicking others?
I think people our age are very skeptical of any sort of possible positive of doing what other people are doing, if that makes sense. So, but I feel like in some ways, the kind of the idea of mimetic desire could also be a good thing. So, like some of my, quote unquote, myself, being myself, in some ways isn't a good thing, because sometimes I just want to sit around and be lazy and watch TV and just be a slob.
Yeah.
But like if I hang out with you three guys and you're all talking about how you're going to go exercise tomorrow, it's like, crap, maybe I should want to go exercise tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you could, I mean, extrapolate that to whatever example you want, right? So I don't know. I feel like in some ways it can almost be a positive thing as well, in terms of, just helping us, become better. But so I feel like it's the difficulty then is kind of figuring out when it's positive versus when I'm desiring something I shouldn't want. If that makes sense, I don't really know.
That's super fair.
But
I just felt like the way he talks about it and describes it, it's like a purely conflict-driven negative thing. And maybe it's, in what ways isn't it? And what's the anecdote to it?
The anecdote or the antidote? Antidote. Okay, that's what I thought you were
It was a slip
going
of
for,
tongue.
but-
Calling the kettle black, huh, Landon?
No, but I have an anecdote for.
I wanted both, actually. I wanted the anecdotal antidote.
Got it. I think, and it, like, Girard gets to this especially when he talks about, I guess just the way in which, like, Christianity kind of subverts the mimesis, and like how Christianity is like the kind of hope, so to speak, but it doesn't necessarily play out just because, for various reasons, he says people don't really have the guts to kind of do it, I guess. But like, certainly with my like discernment in terms of going into seminary, I would say is like the antidote, and like the antidote of that is like, I guess, just authentic discernment, where you're talking with people who you trust and people who are interested in you, but not interested in their end result, if that makes sense. People aren't trying to convince you one way or the other, but people who are, people who have, who are just like kind of wise walls with which you can bounce your your thoughts, your feelings, and desires off of, because without that, kind of like Mike and Ross have both alluded to, like, if it was just you and just yourself, that's a really fast path to go crazy.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned kind of the second concept, so we'll read the second idea here from Girard.
And so Christ's death on the cross frees humankind from this deep, profound, inescapable, and largely hidden cycle of the scapegoating impulse.
Yes. Potentially it does. It does. And Christianity asserts certainly that it does, that it's the only true religion, and that it says the truth about man and about God. But very few people take these statements seriously, as you well know. And they should take them literally.
Why? You have said it several points now. It's obvious once you see it. It's the simplest. Christianity is different, and yet, and yet
they
we don't
want it.
They don't want it.
But you know as much about that as I do. We just have to see the fact that they don't see both. You see, the Christians don't dare see the similarity because they are too timid. If you
They're
tell
afraid
them,
that Christianity may be one
may
other.
be a myth, therefore they refuse to say the situation is a mythical one. But they say the truth about it, and there is no more myth. Christianity destroys mythology.
So I think we'll talk about this is generally the start of like the scapegoat mechanism, scapegoating as a final outcome of a lot of mimetic desire, where I'll just throw it out there right now. There's all kinds of different words for scapegoating. Bullying, panic, sacrificial lambs, shooting the messenger. More of the recent ones, probably victim blaming, victimization, all the stuff where we kind of kick each other under the bus. So what's going on here is Girard is saying, like, there were all these myths at the time before Christianity. Like, I've often heard, like, in discussing the Christian faith with atheists or others, it's like, oh, the flood story, that's in 10 other religions. Oh, like the way that, creation happened, that's in other religions. But what could be possible is, like, the Christian story it looks and feels kind of like those other stories, whether they're mythical or real. But the difference is, like, the perfect God at the cross, that final act, like, was purely innocent and, like, got all of the blame, and took the fall for everyone and did not have to. And that is the most unique thing in the Christian faith.
Can I give a shot to bridging the gap between this and the last segment?
How do we tie them together?
So we identified mimetic desire as this distinctly human trait. Okay. So along with that, this distinctly human trait comes conflict / micro wars, you could say, that existed in the hundreds of thousands of years of human existence. Okay. Now, what he expresses somewhere in the course of the speech is that with that being the case, all we can have then is conflict. But why don't we have that? Why do we actually manage to not have conflict? And this is where the scapegoat mechanism comes in play. He says that the scapegoat mechanism is the fundamental reason why civilization is able to exist despite mimetic theory, mimetic desire. Yeah. And he explains it this way: is that we observe in all of these ancient myths that what happens is that you have these two communities who disagree about something, where they should dig the next well, how many wives person A should have. They can't agree on these things going on there. But what they can agree on is who is the guiltiest person in the community, who is most responsible for the violence and trauma that their community is experiencing. And so this person becomes the scapegoat, the sacrificial lamb. And it's obviously murky exactly the psychological and metaphysical connections between this person and whatever problems they're having. But the point that Girard makes is that it simply feels good to have a scapegoat and kill him or her, maybe, who knows. And
or
they kill
cancel
him
them.
or her, and they cancel them maybe in the woke communities that don't have the death penalty. And what happens is this profound cohesiveness, right? And that is what makes civilization possible. And he says that all of these ancient myths are not myths in a sense. They reflect actual things that happened. And how I understand it is when these myths no longer become sufficiently binding to still have a civilization, a new myth needs to be generated. And so this is the cycle of all of these ancient myths. Bishop Barron in that 9-minute video on Girard, I think, gives a good modern contemporary example to this scapegoat idea, is that you have two academics in some discipline and they can't agree on anything within the scope of their discipline. But what they can agree on is the third academic who's just absolutely wrong about whatever, right? I mean, that's exactly the same thing at play here.
Excellent tie-in. That was well synthesized.
Thanks. So, I don't know, did you guys buy? I mean, that's a big claim, the idea that, okay, every myth in ancient civilization is founded upon this scapegoating idea. That is what Girard is claiming, that this is what makes civilization possible.
I wouldn't say
prior to Christianity.
All of the myths, but I think you can look around today and we use scapegoats everywhere. I don't know why when you were talking, it flashed across my mind like Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill, right? Like
Oh, I'm re-listening to that.
Like
for the third
they're
time.
like something went wrong, and like they needed to like have a victim there. So
the over under for the Mars Hill reference was surpassed. So all of those bettors who bet the over have won.
that was just like one example of, I don't know, a like cancelable, or you were talking about conflict. Like the only thing we can agree on is like someone needs to be outed. And that seems like that is the easiest path.
Yeah, you're right. It's like getting rid of the least common denominator. But yeah, the cancel culture idea, I think it is the exact same thing. It's right. Yeah, you can't agree on anything meaningful, but what you can agree on is this person, they're bad.
I don't know if I have an answer to Mike's question about, do I buy it about every myth having that, just because I don't know if I could just start rattling off every myth and confidently state, oh, this was the scapegoat here and here. But when he was talking about the idea of the scapegoat, that for me, I don't know if it was more clear for you guys, was very like immediate, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As opposed to where the mimetic desire, I mean, kind of like I said, it took me a second to really, I feel like, follow what he was saying maybe more. But with the scapegoat stuff, like immediately I was just like, oh yeah, that, like, I feel like I see that everywhere. And I think maybe like in his type of, and like listening to him speak, I feel like you're seeing it big, like the big scapegoat, or these, this is where mimetic desire has to lead. You have to have a scapegoat in order to have societies and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like, I think I see the scapegoat, I mean, even on a super small scale, I feel like we're constantly making scapegoats. I mean, you can start, I mean, my boss did something, you want to get a team of people talking together on the same page. The boss says something that makes them all mad, and all of a sudden the boss is the bad guy. And I feel like you can like see how it almost creates unity in a way. I actually thought of, like, what was it, Mel Brooks's speech in the movie The Miracle, and I'm sure there's other sports examples too. Like, he intentionally just starts yelling and screaming like he's the bad guy, and then like he leaves the room and makes a funny quip, and like it was an intentional choice by him.
Yeah.
He wasn't actually angry about it.
Right.
And yet the locker room's going nuts and they come out all together. It's like he used that as a way to unify his team,
to rally them.
Made himself.
Yes, I know. The more I started thinking about it, I was like, I feel like I see that all over the place. Anyway, so that just jumped out at me, I feel like.
That's a good positive example. Like when you're willing to, really perhaps when you're willing to like be like Christ and sacrifice yourself for the good of the hockey team, or like if you're willing to like model the scapegoat and you don't care about being the least common denominator, like that is probably when the formula works in like group smaller situations.
And also being the innocent scapegoat too, because that's like a key distinction Girard makes, is that like it's not just that Jesus is a scapegoat, because there's a million scapegoats, but he is the innocent one. Like he's the one who actually has like a perfect case for not being the person to blame, for this sort of kind of weird conflict between Jews and Romans and all the people who wanted him dead, So like, yeah, he has the best case for it, and yet he chose it, so like I guess that's the other side too, is not just, just being like innocent and having that to back you up.
Yeah. So to put sort of a fine point that might be like helpful. Yeah. And Girard also claims with these pagan myths that there was something in this cohesiveness, which is generated from the scapegoat mechanism, that people did believe. I mean, this is sort of a big claim to claim what people thought, over thousands upon thousands of iterations, that the cohesiveness that which came about through this scapegoating sacrificial lamb thing was something religious, right? Yeah. And like Matt was saying, just like make it super obvious that, yeah, what is the same about Christianity is yeah, in a certain sense, a sacrifice being made by the community, but it's the wrong decision. Like Matt said, it's someone who is innocent, and it's told from the perspective of the victim. The victim is the hero in the story rather than the community, as I understand it.
Do we have any other notes or thoughts on what scapegoating means?
I'll put the challenge out there. So I understand what Girard is saying and what makes Christianity different, that the scapegoat is innocent. We should have to take a drink every time we say scapegoat. And it's fascinating, it's interesting, I get what he's saying, but why is it that important? Why can't it just be another myth where it's just different in that way?
Yeah, you would, if you were lining it up, you would be curious to go research and see if there were any. I feel like I've heard that is the unique part of Christianity, though. There's no other religions where God sacrificed himself. But why does it matter specifically? Why does that end all myths?
So I think it'd be an interesting, maybe we can pivot to the apocalyptic stuff, because that's
just admit that we don't know the answer to the question.
Well, yeah, honestly, I mean, I think that, I mean, I think it is an important dynamic. I don't think it's, I suppose I don't think it's the only dynamic at play, right? I think that, I guess, I would perhaps criticize Girard, or I don't even know if I'm interpreting Girard correctly. I've barely really scratched the surface with him, but if you were to say all desire is purely mimetic, and, that seems a little deterministic. It seems a little there's no autonomy to anything, which, so I don't know if that's a right interpretation. And if you are going to go down that route, then it's, I mean, it would, I feel like you could, if you were to take that and drive it to the logical, or to just to scrutinize it to the nth degree, it just seems like an untenable position, I guess, to be that everything is purely whatever. But I don't know if that's what he's saying. I couldn't tell you that, I suppose. But
just briefly, that is one of the criticisms that I read.
Yeah. I mean, it's so I think that seems fair. Is it a very strong and maybe I don't know if you would say I mean, I don't know what other mechanisms are out there that you would kind of put on the same par, but it does seem to be a very profound one. You know what I mean? That much I would certainly give him. And certainly be that's an important thing to acknowledge. And I guess maybe another arrow pointing to the truth of Christianity. I suppose when something's true, it's a lot of things are pointing at it from different angles, and all right, so you've got that is another big arrow.
Didn't it end myths? When we think of myths, we think of ancient tribes and honestly mythologies that are before Christ. The only it was the last one perhaps in the literary volume.
Yeah, there is something to that, which they did make a point of, that pagan myths are no longer tenable, right? No one believes in Zeus anymore, really, And why exactly is that? What's the relationship between that and
Islam is the only one that came up 600 years later.
Yeah, and he made some really interesting commentaries on Islam, which I'm not capable of re-expressing here, but they were interesting, let me tell you.
I think it was pretty. I don't know. I don't know if you guys like his small comment when he said the interviewer kind of tried to say, "Now we have to establish a scope of time here." Blah blah blah, and he was kind of like, "No, like I don't really care about that. I'm a theoretician or something." I don't remember what he called himself, but just, and I'm not going anywhere. This is more just an observation. Like, it's pretty impressive to just be able to like think. Like, he came up with this idea. It didn't seem so much that it didn't at least seem to me that he observed this and then took that somewhere. It seemed more like he came up with the idea of
Right.
mimetic desire and then figured out in theory that the answer was scapegoating. And then it's like, oh yeah, you can see this everywhere, which like gives a lot of credence to this theory that you developed. And I was just kind of impressed. I was like, I don't think I've ever, I'm obviously not all the list any credential that they did for him at the start of that episode, or the start of the speech. But I was just kind of impressed by that, just how he actually seemed to have an original thought that he just was able to then provide a solution to, and then it just happened to ring super true when you actually like look at the world.
Well, obviously, you guys didn't read the critiques deeply enough on Wikipedia, but this is not completely his original idea. He's definitely the most profound conveyor of it, but someone did precede him before with at least a partial ownership of the idea. So just in fairness to that
You're right,
gentleman or gentlewoman.
What do you guys have thoughts on the how's it all end? Does he make prophetic predictions?
I was just gonna ask a question just to keep diving in and trying to get a better understanding. And I mean, are there any desires, or maybe it's a kind of a semantics thing a little bit, how you're classifying things, but that don't seem to fit this idea of mimetic desire. So, and at least when I think of the word desire, like for some things, I do think it really seemed to ring true, but then I don't know, and maybe it's not the same thing, but like when I think of food or something like that, hunger, like that doesn't seem to be something I'm copying. That seems to be something just, I don't know if internal is the right word, intrinsic, I don't know the right word, but that I
think Girard would say those aren't
Right.
desires. Those are like just instincts.
So almost more of an urge. The only reason I was going to bring it up, because I feel like I've heard, that makes sense with the animal ones, but I feel like C.S. Lewis, I feel like we could have referenced in his Abolition of Man a little bit with the capitalism thing, but to take him a different route.
Sure.
He uses, I believe, and it's been a while since I've read Mere Christianity, but doesn't he use the fact that we have certain desires that seem universal almost as evidence for belief in God in the first place? So, like, I'm hungry, therefore there must be food. That's like the animal one, but it also seems like so I feel like if I remember correctly, he used other type of things, like if you say, I'm hungry, therefore there has to be food, you could almost look at, I have this, we have this desire for timelessness, there must be eternity. I don't know, like things like that.
Sure.
Almost as, not proofs, but reasons to kind of start to think that God may exist. So that was one thing I thought of that I was like, that seems to be somewhat at odds more with the mimetic desire type thought process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the universality of it, I could see it slicing two ways. One is you can say it's universal because it's an instinct or it's this sort of individual thing that everyone has. But then you could also say, well, is it universal because everyone else wants it, Which like maybe like, yeah, to some degree that might be a chicken and the egg type of thing. Which is kind of two ways, two sides of the same coin, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I guess that to me seems like a little bit of I don't know if there's an answer, I guess.
Yeah. I think I found an answer to our significance of Christianity as a unique scapegoat mechanism here that someone wrote in the notes they just forgot about. I'm just going to read the paragraph here. It's short enough. Scapegoating serves as a psychological relief for a group of people, as we've discussed here. Girard contends that this is what happened in the narrative of Jesus of Nazareth, the central figure in Christianity. Yes, we got that. The difference between the scapegoating of Jesus and others, Girard believes, is that in the resurrection of Christ from the dead, he is shown to be an innocent victim, right? Because, since obviously Christianity claims the resurrection took place in actual history, it has the capacity to influence history, right? In the resurrection of the dead, Jesus from the dead, he is shown to be an innocent victim. Humanity is thus made aware of its violent tendencies, and the cycle is broken. Thus, Girard's work is significant as a reconstruction of the atonement theory. And the atonement theory is this is how you explain the mechanism for salvation, right? This is how salvation works. That's what atonement theory is. Does that make sense?
So one of us wrote that. Wasn't me.
Down at the bottom. You're just copy and pasting. Oh, I'm gonna look like I did so much
I guess,
work.
I mean, at least according to that, it's more that he turned it upside because he kind of did the opposite way. It made us aware of it in the first place, so we don't really have a need for it anymore. Is that somewhat what you said?
Not exactly what I said, but I think that's a reasonable takeaway. I think maybe one takeaway I can sort of have is that it bridges the gap between the idea of original sin entering history and in Christ, or the redemptive act of Christ's death and resurrection. Obviously, the way that's communicated there in Mystery Persons paragraph, it basically reduces is a sort of demeaning word, but it does attribute the I guess you might say the grace of the resurrection to a purely psychological phenomenon. That it's like, oh, look, we observed what we did, and now this is who we actually are. Yeah, and that is an interesting idea for sure, right? And I always think that is interesting. In scripture or in the gospels during Easter or Lent, we always read about how the Jews were responsible for killing Christ. And always like, man, that sounds like so bad. Like, yeah, maybe Paul was a little bit of a racist. But the like modern commentaries, right, that you see in the missalettes is something like, no, it was not just the Jews. It was that we all contributed to the crucifixion of Christ in a sense. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something to that, being able to believe in a very real way your own capacity for violence, right? Because with these other pagan myths, like, there's no as far as I understand, there's no recognition of your own capacity for violence. It's like something magical happened and now we're hunky-dory for a little while. Versus in the crucifixion, you acknowledge your own profound shortcomings, right?
This might be a little bit of a pivot, but Ross, you mentioned something about C.S. Lewis and like capitalism, and I guess where were you going with that? Because I think that to me was like an interesting. Well, it didn't really come out in the speech itself, but it did come out in some of the Jonathan B. video stuff about just like that mechanism. But like, yeah, I guess what were you thinking about in regards to C.S. Lewis and capitalism? I'm curious about that.
Just when we were talking.
Can you think and we take a 2-minute break and get water or bathroom, whatever?
I haven't had to pee once during this whole podcast. This is a record.
As we get older, we're gonna have to take way more pee breaks.
Freshened up? Oh, Mike didn't have his headphones in. Freshened up, Mike?
Yep.
All right, Ross, hit it. Do you remember the question?
All right. So I feel like when we started talking for a bit about how it seems as if capitalism seemingly gives an outlet to some of the what would have previously led to conflict from mimetic desire. So kind of like we said, right? At one point in history, you're the biggest, baddest guy in the room. It's gonna lead to this conflict or violence, and you're gonna want to be a tyrant and all these things. But in modern day, it might make you some businessman. I don't know, something else. But so in some ways, we were talked a little bit ago about how capitalism seems like it has given this more positive outlet to some of these desires and the consequences of them. But what I was going to ask then and just didn't was kind of, it doesn't seem, at least to me, that doesn't seem like a long-term fix, though, simply because there's still going to be conflict, right? So it's almost like it almost seems like a more of a temporary pause on, not necessarily, I don't know about war, but maybe war, I guess. And it made me think a little bit about our last episode with C.S. Lewis and Abolition of Man, and he talked about how anytime we think we're conquering nature, we're just using nature to conquer someone else, if that makes sense. So capitalism is still, like, I don't know, I feel like I kind of thought about that as, it's still going to pit people against each other. Somebody's still going to be on top and do better, so somebody's going to be doing worse. And that seems like it's going to inevitably lead to conflict as well. So anyway, that was kind of I started trying to think through those thoughts a little bit, and I think somebody said something and it went a different way, and I didn't really have a good way to say it. But so that was kind of what I was going to pose was, does it seem like capitalism is actually a solution to this kind of, what's going to end up in conflict, or is it more just a temporary pause?
Well, I think that's the, I don't know. That's the part of that's the part of Girard's thought that I maybe want to get into a little bit more, just because, I mean, I think he does paint. I feel like most Americans kind of see capitalism as this like sort of badge of honor. I don't know if that's the right way to think of it, but this, a rather positive light. Even amidst like the kind of popularity of like democratic socialism and that sort of phraseology, I guess, but like, but no one lives in a democratically socialist way, right? Like no one just gives their money to the government just because they think the government's that great at doing good things with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like everyone has the chance to live in a democratic socialist world if they want to just give their money, pay more taxes, right? If they just voluntarily give money to the government's not going to say no, right? But no one does that, right?
Right.
So we all keep our money and we all spend it and doing whatever the heck we want with it, right? So we all kind of like live this out, right? Live this sort of like capitalist hooray sort of mentality. But yeah, I mean, I think that is, I guess that was like one of the more intriguing aspects of it, because like, I guess I don't know how tenable it is long term. Like I think there's a lot of good that's come from it. Certainly, like
what's tenable long term?
Improved, like quality of life is improved. Like we can pretty much. I'm saying I'm not sure capitalism is tenable long term. Like at least that's something.
Then no,
to
you
think
were
about.
predicting the end of capitalism.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth thinking about. Well, I don't know if I'm predicting it or not. I'm just saying.
Matt is predicting.
I'm just throwing it out there. Like,
Matt, are you voting for Bernie Sanders? Oh, you go from one extreme to another.
So here's the thing, though. Here's the thing, because like I don't think capitalism should only be seen as not socialism. You know what I mean? Like I think perhaps there's a third way, which might be something like akin to, I don't know, small community, just self-sufficient units. I don't know. if you want to think of it that way. That would, whatever. I don't know what that would look like. This is just
so basically get rid of interstates.
I don't know.
So that every community is independent.
Well, yeah, again, this is just kind of very abstract thought. But
takes 2 days of travel to get together with you guys for our camping trip.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe we'd have more PTO if we were in that sort of say, but yeah, I think he does have really, really interesting thought, and I want to dig more into it, just on a personal level, just because I think there is something uniquely, like, capitalism has accelerated a lot, but it doesn't change our human nature. Right. It's accelerated our capacity to cure people. It's accelerated our capacity to destroy people. It's accelerated our capacity to communicate truths and lies. It seems more of a, just like a gas pedal than it is a steering wheel of like where we are as a human race. And I think that's the thing that Girard gets at in like a really powerful way, and dare I say prophetic way, that like, yeah, as much as like conservatives like kind of have tied their horse to that cart, and as much as like even non-conservatives have tied their horse to that cart, like we've all tied all of Western society has tied their horses to that cart. But like, yeah, I mean, certainly we've reaped some benefits, but like, yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, I mean, I think Girard's thought is interesting, at least in so far as he's like, rather critical of that, or of like the direction. Like this is just, it's a less violent, more tasteful way of scapegoating and abusing each other.
Yeah, to kind of, I think, make your point a little bit more clear. Capitalism as a virtue, which I mean ties in with the metaphor that you're the gas pedal versus the steering wheel sort of thing, right? Yeah, because there is something that is just very satisfying in the doctrine that to have a good life is to make a lot of money and be an entrepreneur or doctor or lawyer, whatever. And I think another aspect of it too is that communicating that difference, just it can feel like very fuzzy or wishy-washy. It's like, it's much simpler to say, make a lot of money, blah, 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 versus what my brother said the other day, which was great to my niece Addie. Money is to be a means, not a way when discerning the future of your life. Just something as simple as that, iterated over millions of families in the United States, can make such a profound difference. But is that like a super sexy thing to say? It can seem sort of inconsequential, but
it almost seems like, and maybe Christianity maybe this comes from a little bit of, the revelations that we have gotten from since Christ. But when you say things like that, I feel like everybody would say they agree with that statement. Like if you said, money is a means, I don't know how you worded it, but yeah, but
a
like
means,
no one
not
would
a
say
way.
that. Like if I say, yeah, money doesn't make you happy, everybody would be like, oh yeah, I know. And yet, man, maybe it's the fact that there's this thing called mimetic desire, but we all still seem to live like it is the way, if that makes sense. Like everybody would like that Facebook post, and then everybody is going to go Google at someone's big, nice house, if that makes sense. Except us, of course. But, yeah.
Not true.
Yeah, all of us are poor except Landon. Only a rich person would say that.
Final passage? What are we feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's sort of segue from, how do we get from Christianity as this flipping on its head of the pagan myth to the apocalypse, to Bruce Willis having to save us from this asteroid. From Dottie was the name of the asteroid. How do we get there?
I mean, there's rocket ships and Ben Affleck, and there's a slingshot maneuver around the moon.
Yeah, I love that scene. Like 22,000 miles per hour, and they're like bodies flying. Oh, that was great.
Right. And now the apocalypse.
I'll just say something brief to introduce this because it's not going to take very long. How I understood it's like, oh, well, yeah, you have the Christian myth in the literary sense of the term, entering into history, having this capacity to redeem humanity from these pagan myths but conflict continues to exist and continues to be managed in these other ways through capitalism and law and order. And he comments on some things with the United States and China, which is, as Matt used the word earlier, prophetic. And so we're in the end times, folks. Season 3 will be our last.
Real quick, before we jump too much in the apocalypse, I think it might be helpful. Like, I feel like we've used the word like the Christian myth a lot, and I think when a lot of people hear that, I think a lot of people probably associate myth with untrue story, a fictional story. Fair? I think I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I probably would have thought that before. Like if somebody says myth. I know Tolkien's got some stuff on myth too but either way, so I think it might be fair if we give a quick, like, what do we mean by that? Like, because obviously in this setting, we're not saying that means it's not true, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think the meaning of leaning into Christian myth or wherever it's compared to like, oh, that similar type story is in a Hindu religion or this like native culture, which you do hear a lot. Since we're all familiar with COVID, like the Christian myth is like the vaccine that kills the virus. So the COVID-19 vaccine was designed to look like COVID, like all vaccines are. Like it goes in, it has the same biological shape as the disease, but in fact, it's the antidote, not the anecdote, to the virus that killed it. And so the same way, if you would ever hear like, oh, Christianity isn't real because like it's just the next myth, it's like, well, it has some really key turning points of like inversing most myths around, and it's the last myth. While it does have similarities, it overturns them, and that was like by design. Like God, made those similarities because that's what humans understood as like oral traditions and stories that we told ourselves to put it in that type of vessel that would transcend other myths.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, C.S. Lewis said something about, well, I think this was in Mere Christianity, why are there are these other similar stories of a dying and rising God or king or something like that. And I think C.S. Lewis's exact words are something like, and throughout all of history, God gave us these sweet dreams throughout different civilizations and cultures so that we could recognize it when it comes, or something like that, which sort of makes sense. Yeah, sort of a divine pedagogy in a way. Yeah, I mean, when I use the word myth, Christian myth, that applies to any story that has like a sort of transcendental quality, whether or not it's factually true.
Girard, though, doesn't admit, he seems to proclaim that Christianity is kind of like the break. That's where the scapegoating cycle breaks, right? Or at least it has that capacity. And he says it doesn't, or it hasn't, right? but I wasn't sure I really understood why. He seemed to say like something to the effect of Christians are worried that it'll be perceived as a myth, so they don't really describe it in a scapegoating mechanism. And then he said others just dismiss it as a myth. But I guess, I don't know if I'm understanding that correctly. Or maybe it's just like that's kind of the factor of original sin and the world has to end at some point.
Yeah. There was some nuance in those lines where it was like he was speaking to the intellectuals or the atheists. Like they would say, like, it's just another myth. To which he would say, like, look at it. It's the opposite of all myths. If you like read the story in the text. And then to Christians, he does say, like, essentially, like, Christians would never admit that because that is admitting that it's man-made or like too similar to fake stuff, which I think why that kind of like that vaccine analogy kind of made a lot of sense to me. Like it looks like it so that you can like catch a lot of people up in it. It's similar, but there's really key differences.
He sort of, I think, answers our question like in the speech, I think, but to make sure I'm thinking of like quite correctly what you guys are saying. So it seems almost like Christianity should fix this, and yet these problems still exist, right? So World War II still happened even after Christ and stuff. So, I mean, he says later on, does Rene Girard believe that there is any way to turn the tide? And he responds, yes.
It's about the only thing he gave as a solution.
The apocalyptic thing was kind of, I'm trying to look at it. The time of the line he says, it's the time when you no longer know if it is nature where this is hurting you or if it is man himself who is helping the apocalyptic forces. I think Matt put, and I thought that too, like similar to the end of the abolition of man. It seems like kind of a similar trajectory of where, C.S. Lewis and prophesied in a way that that's where we're going to end up. And then I feel like Rene Girard is kind of saying a similar thing here. I feel like there's more here on the apocalypse, but...
Yeah. I mean, he does make some, I think, fairly specific predictions of mimesis in the U.S. and China playing out and being fairly destructive, given just the pent-up conflict energy. But I don't know if that's that important.
Yeah. So, the U.S.-China anecdote was really interesting and a little bit unnerving, admittedly, right? Because in 2007, he said that something very, we'll make it as benign as possible. Destabilizing is going to occur between the United States and China. Sino-American relations, if you want to use a fancy word at your next cocktail party. He says in 2007, when, people, when all of the boomers were drinking their white wine at their Sunday afternoon New Age church, and they're like, man, the world is great. Man, we're riding high. And he makes this prediction that other academics said that's silly, that's not believable. And yet here we are 15 years later, things are becoming more tenuous between the United States and China, despite there never having occurred any real, border issue, or China has human rights issue, but not exactly the forefront of stuff here. It's just like trade based, you got some stuff being like percolating in from Russia and Ukraine and such, and but there's not enough like silicon for our chips in our cars, right? It's this slow trickle, which he sort of predicted, rather than, as is referenced in some of the content we looked at, the liberalizing of trade between the United States and China being like this salvation of globalism. That's trademarked. You can't reuse that line.
Which, if I recall, and I didn't listen to the entire speech between those two guys, John and David, I forget who the two guys were, but like they used kind of the example of law being a way to use violence.
Yeah, law
Control violence. Do you guys remember that part? So
the state or the law has a monopoly on violence.
So then the United States, right. Because if I do anything, the law can do something more to me. But on like the international stuff, that doesn't really exist. So just kind of a So I don't know. So what's
it was a great theory.
Oh yeah, it's a key point there.
There's no greater, like there's no law above U.S. and China because. So with that said, like is war the only?
Yeah.
The inevitable outcome is that. If that makes sense, I don't know. And would that be the apocalypse?
Yep.
That sort of sounds like a
final question.
Final bell question.
Okay.
What is this?
At least I had the guts to say
question.
something. Matt peed in his pants when you gave us that look.
Yeah.
All right. Final bell question.
Go for it.
All right. Did we agree, or is there a different final bell question? It's the final bell. Bing, bing, bing.
What round is it? It's 15. One more round. And there's no stopping this now. This is our round. Won't stop it now. You stop, we don't stop. All your strength, all your power, all your love, everything you've got. This is all light to move on. Now.
Repeat the question.
Go ahead and restate it.
So without a monopoly of, without this, there being a state to have a monopoly of violence, on a more global scale, is war the inevitable outcome of this or any sort of international dispute like this?
And as Girard claims, with the advent of the atomic bomb, the end of civilization. Since obviously in World War II, the United States was the only one with an atomic bomb.
It just sounds too specific. Like, I get that he's got some very fundamental theories, but then to have the end of those theories like result in a fairly specific prediction between two countries, it's like, I don't know. We don't know the day or the time that something like that may happen. Or where, or who, or how.
Or if, or when, or now.
No, we know if. So I'm going to postulate a little bit of a historical thought experiment here in preface to my answer, which I have yet to formulate 100%.
Just keep rapping like Landon and Mike are doing.
So Christianity theoretically ends the scapegoating, right? So Christianity almost, in a sense, makes a scapegoat out of paganism, right? So like paganism is
sure
done and over with. We've moved past that, right? So Christianity, struggles for a few hundred years, but eventually, Constantine frees it up, makes it the official religion of the Roman Empire. Christianity rules the day for, 1,200 years. So, at least in Europe and most of the Middle East at that point, maybe. I don't know. I suppose Islam kind of for, Ottoman Empire or whatever. But so then, at least with Europe, they decide that the scientist that the priest is the new scapegoat, right? Or the Christian is the scapegoat. This old school church thing that is holding us back from science, which is the new thing, right? So science gradually comes to rule the day, right? It's kind of where we're at now. And
well, can I? That's where we were at 15 years ago, where science was still the fountain of truth.
Is science not ruling the day anymore?
I would debate that, but we'll just play with the idea. Go on.
So
Pick up.
no matter what the precise year, science stops ruling the day. I feel like we are at a meshing point where people are. Yeah, I mean, there is a legitimate, I think in some ways legitimate and other ways kind of irrational critique of science at large. But like, what's going to replace science? You know, what will scapegoat science? And like, that's what I'm not really sure yet, which makes me think, I don't know if it's necessarily just going to be US, China that like puts an end to things. I feel like there's been scapegoating since, and like, since he admits like Christianity has the potential to like break that cycle, but it hasn't. And I don't know if it will. Just, you know, original sin and concupiscence and like all of the things that have kind of made humans do bad things for all over the world. Yeah, it seems too specific. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess I just got a hunch that there's something that's going to scapegoat science. And might I suggest reading The Canticle of Leibowitz? Mike, have you read it?
I've read a portion of it.
I feel like that is, to some degree, I feel like that might be another prophetic book.
Scapegoating science, that is such a big concept.
Well, to counter or comment on Matt's thoughts precisely, I mean, I would say hopefully we're not misusing the word scapegoating by this point. Ross is on the ground because he's drank 100 times since we said.
Don't worry, I'm in my bunker. I'm fine down here.
But let's just play with it. The scapegoat of science, if you will, would be far left or far right thought, I would say, whether it is election doubting on the far right or critical race theory and its cousins on the far left, right, where it doesn't matter what science has to say in the form of like statistics with election fraud, or on the other side of it with statistics regarding critical race theory. It's no, this is what is true. Yeah, that'd be my counter to. So yeah, I don't know. Just interesting. This is not my final response. I'm just simply rebutting. Isn't, well, never mind. It's not that interesting. Okay, I will give my final bell answer though, and then Landon can have his final bell to bring us home for season 2. Oh man, I just sort of like felt something inside, like the end of season 2.
Dude, season 3, it's gonna be wild.
We'll probably be a part of China by then. Yeah, I mean, I sort of get what he's saying. The idea that conflict is inevitable, and it sort of there is no global state to sort of manage interstate conflict or internation conflict. And we obviously now have the capacity to physically destroy each other many times over. Right, between a number of superpowers. Okay, so we could accept that as truth, or reasonable, very realistic possibility, but at the same time, not be completely debilitated with anxiety or fear. Because, okay, so the atom bomb, nuclear weapons, they've existed for 80 years essentially. And humanity has existed for 400,000 years or whatever, something like that, right? So you can conceive of us being in the end times for another 2,000 years, 3,000 years, where we have these nuclear weapons sitting in our holsters, knowing that they're a possibility there. I think another sort of like constructive thought where we can still take Girard's thought seriously, but not, again, be worried that the world's about to end is the idea that, okay, forget about nuclear weapons. Pretend that not every, but I don't even know how many countries have nuclear weapons. That'd be a good trivia question. My guess, do you guys want to make guesses? Then we'll look it up.
16.
No, you wait. Make a guess before, so we're all ready.
I'm sorry, I had to say it.
My guess. I was gonna guess probably like 20 though.
Oh, of course, right by mine.
I guess it was mimetic desire.
Later, it looks like he's just
Landon, are you looking it up?
I'm not.
I guess he's just not committed to the podcast. Texting someone.
Countries with nukes.
Matt, do you have a guess? How many countries have nuclear weapons? Texas definitely has some.
How many? 57.
Okay. I said 20.
16.
Ross said 16.
11.
Final answer?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's the answer? Someone looking it up?
Alexa. Steve, producer Steve. It says 9 countries.
Wow, that's way less. Oh, we're good. We're good for another 10,000 years. Oh, okay. So, but I was in the middle of my final bell question. Oh, but okay. So let's pretend, rather than there being nuclear weapons at stake, let's just imagine that these, now we know 9 countries have a button, at the president's desk that it's the button. You hit the button, it's end of world. That's it. But at least you pulled the trigger, right? That's basically what's at stake. Like, the world ends, but at least you weren't like a chicken about it. You ended on your own terms. Would any country a country's leader in the right mind push that button, right? Because even Kim Jong-un understands I believe the consequences if he launched a nuclear weapon at the United States. Like, that's not going to end well for the world. Maybe it'd be a little bit different because North Korea is such a weaker country. Hopefully I'm not bringing World War on us by saying that. Versus if we're China versus U.S. But yeah, I don't know. That's sort of my thought, that superpowers are conscientious enough of the risks regarding nuclear war that it's just very unlikely that would happen. It would be like the only believable way would be if the metaphor, you're bleeding out and it's just a matter of maintaining your dignity. Which I don't know. Maybe that is a realistic scenario. Landon?
Well, I started off with my answer. I thought his prediction seemed a little too specific.
I'm going to agree with Landon. And I guess everybody. I feel like it's like, I don't know. So again, what were the 2 guys' names? Dave and John? Okay. So like he gave the...
Yeah. It's Gaius and Titius.
They gave the example of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Russia was cut off communications and the submarine, and they needed 3 guys. They had to unanimously vote yes to shoot the nuclear weapon, and which would have effectively could have started World War III and ended the world. And 2 guys said yes, and 1 guy said no. So like literally one person in that instance, was able to save, sort of in a way, save the world. So I feel like Girard's kind of answer we mentioned earlier, like behaving like Christians. It's like, well, yeah, you really just need somebody to actually act how they're supposed to, and that can have pretty big consequences. Anybody else remember the Dark Knight movie here? Anybody else when they're about to, the Joker thinks that they're gonna blow each other up and he's gonna win, but like they behave as they should. And nobody pushes the button, and turns out, Gotham gets to live another day. So I feel like we have the capacity to do that, if we choose to do so. So I guess I still have enough hope in that we will do so, at least for a while.
Well, this speech ends with a reading from Luke about the Christmas story. Final chapter, Luke 2. And they were in the same country, shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over the flock by night. Lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. Suddenly there was an angel and a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and earth peace, goodwill towards men. We wish you a Merry Christmas from the Speech Guys. Take a look at Rene Girard, Google him, look him up, grapple with these concepts, and thanks for listening.
And drinking.
With us?
And thinking.
You said it. You didn't say it
That's
right though
what
either.
you say. I said and drinking.
And
then
with
when you knucklehead said
let's start that
thinking,
over. Let's just start that over.
And thinking. And my dad wants us to add one more thing. Be safe out there.
All right.
Let me handle that. Let me handle that.
You're doing the drinking.
Okay.
I'm doing the thinking. Ross is with us. All right.
Yeah. Hey, it's been a great show, folks. Thanks for drinking.
And thinking.
With us.
Hey, be safe out there. It's been a great second season. We'll see you on the other side. Cue the music.
Will lead us to a better place.